Welcome to another late night edition of the PhinManiacs.com live podcast. I am your host, Louis Sung. My co-host, Chad Ronnebaum, is with me. And, of course, we have Matthew Kanata with me as usual. And it's a late night. We're tired, but we're here bringing you Dolphins talk because this is what we do. We love our Dolphins through thick and thin, mostly thick nowadays, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Pretty much we're going to talk...
The night is just beginning, Lulu.
Yeah, this might just be beginning. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's
So,
go. Keep it moving, Phil.
Yeah, keep it moving. So we're gonna talk about the Bills, obviously, and then we're gonna talk about what the heck is wrong with the Dolphins and if there's any hope of possibly fixing it, whether it's now or this next year or maybe the next 10 years. But Matt, you're making it very difficult for me to introduce the show here, buddy.
Go on, buddy.
Okay, so anyway, I was there at that game. I took a picture with Chad, and I thought that, hey, we were there together. The game was in the bag because the Dolphins before that game were 2-0, and Chad and I were both present at Dolphins games. But I guess what happened is that since we were not sitting together, the magic didn't work. So it needs to. Now I know that the Dolphins are 2-0 when we're sitting together. The Dolphins are only 2-1 when Chad and I just happen to be there. So now I know for sure that Chad and I actually need to be sitting together for it to actually work. So, well.
The Dolphins are 1-1 when I wear my Ndamukong Suh jersey. They are 0-1 when I sit on the left side of the sofa, and they are 1-0 when I sit on the love seat.
So sit on the love seat next time.
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do.
And get yourself a new jersey. Need to get a Jarvis Landry jersey.
My wife bought it for me for my birthday. I can't just get rid of it.
So who said get rid of it? Yeah, add it to your collection.
Listen, I don't got that kind of money, bro.
Yeah, this is true. Okay, so there's those jerseys are freaking expensive. Anyway, so I was at that game. Chad was at that game. We also had Carlos was at that game. He couldn't join us for the show. I guess he had some stuff to do. But there were a lot of people that were watching that home opener, paid a lot of money to get into that home opener, paid $40 parking. Good grief, $40 of parking. Oh, that hurts.
Which is ridiculous, by the way.
That's ridiculous.
It was like 25 last year. I don't know what the deal was with that.
I can tell you why. It's the hype machine. The Dolphins are suddenly going to be playoff contenders. We have everything going for us. We got a new team, new coach. Well, if you want to count Philbin as a new coach because he supposedly changed who he is, then
yeah, right.
I guess you could call him a new coach because he's not Mr. Pick Up the Gum from the field. Now he's just whatever. Who cares? Do whatever you want, coach, which is actually worse than pick up the gum off the field coach. So it looked like from the get-go that the Dolphins wanted nothing to do with that game. It looked like they were bored. It looked like they were expecting to lose. And they'll tell you up and down that that's not the case. We put up like 4 articles today basically telling them, basically saying, no, we always expect to win. We don't know why we're losing. We don't know what's going on. We still think we have confidence in the coach and blah, 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 blah. They're saying all the right things, which is just what the players are supposed to do in the NFL. So props to them. They managed to keep their poker faces on. But
they have no choice, Lois. They got to say that. I mean, what are you going to say? Yeah, we didn't care. I mean, that looks bad for them.
I know.
We were both there, Lois, and I mean, I got to tell you, honestly, I took Mason. This is his first Dolphins game ever, and when Buffalo had scored their first touchdown, Miami came in, they immediately went 3-and-out, which is pretty well their standard offensive opening series every game. They go 3-and-out. And Buffalo came right down and scored, and I just turned to him because what I noticed, it was just apparent. You could just see it from in the stands. When the defense was walking off the field when it was 7-0, it just looked like they were like, oh, well. I mean, that really was their demeanor. I didn't see anybody throwing helmets or mad, or it was just like, yeah, no, whoop-de-doo, no big deal. And I just turned to Mason and I said, this is going to be a long game, buddy, because you could just tell that Miami had already given up when it was 7-0. I mean, it was already over.
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement with you. I mean, Kathy moved down here to take a job in my hometown, and so she was been over 2 out of 3 games already. And I turned to her after the first two defensive series, and I said, there's no way the Dolphins win this game. You could tell there was no rhythm in them. There was no emotion. There was no flow in the game. Just their whole body language. They've given up on the coaching staff, and it's really sad to say 3 weeks into the season that they've given up. But I guess it's a carryover from last season, towards the last few weeks of the season where they gave up on the coaching staff then, and nothing has really changed now in 2015, and I don't know. I guess it's good to give up this early. It's better to give up this early than it is to give up late again. And maybe Philbin saves his job because he uses injuries as an excuse. But they're not buying into what the coaches are selling them anymore. It's a bad situation. Earlier today, I jokingly tweeted out that the Dolphins still have a chance because the Patriots got beat last year 41-14. And some people took it seriously and started yelling at me, but it was obviously sarcasm. And if you remember the Do Your Job show that was on the NFL Network about Belichick, they spent quite some time on the Kansas City Chiefs game. And Belichick said on that show that he knew at halftime there was no way they were going to win that game, but what he wanted to see from his players is the fight in them, the resolve to keep on playing, to get better as the game progressed, and to keep fighting and doing what they do. And he said he saw that in them. And he said from that point forward, he knew that they would be okay. Now, when you look at the Dolphins game against the Bills, you don't see that fight. You don't see that resolve. You don't see that want to get better. Sure, some players are showing that resolve, but the vast majority of them on both sides of the ball were not. And that's the difference between the Dolphins and the Patriots from last year and the ass whooping they took last year. It's not the same. It's not even close to the same, and that's why the Dolphins aren't going to get better. Going into London this week, the Dolphins had Monday off. They came in on Monday, and they have Tuesday off, which was today, and they get their game plan tomorrow, which is Wednesday. The coaching staff is not going to change their philosophy and what they do in just a matter of 2 days, 2 or 3 days. We're going to see more of the same. It's all about execution and the players wanting to buy in. And if they're not buying in, I would be very, very surprised if the Dolphins win on Sunday.
I can't see them winning on Sunday either. It's 9:30 in the morning for us, and we're gonna get up early. And I hate to be like this Debbie Downer, like this person who's like all so negative and doom and gloom, and we're all doomed and all that stuff. But I can't see any other alternative really, because as much as I would like to believe they're gonna beat the Jets, it really doesn't look like they care. It looks like they just want to move on and say, whatever, next game we're getting our paycheck. It's funny because last year I remember that I was absolutely berated, hammered over and over and over again for even implying that Joe Philbin was the problem in Miami. I remember that completely. I wound up getting my first block over it. It's like, so you're telling me that Joe Philbin is not the problem in Miami, even though that you can tell that this personality that he has, this whole blank stare. He always looks lost whenever he's on the. He looks spaced out whenever he's on the sidelines. You show a clip of him on the sidelines, and he has sometimes his mouth is even open, like. It's like, and I hate to talk like this because I love my Dolphins. I will always love my Dolphins. I want to cover them as a career. I want to make this my actual career, but it's painful to have to watch this team deteriorate with all this talent. You have Ndamukong Suh. You have, granted, he's aging, but you still have Cameron Wake, who's a pass rush specialist. You have Earl Mitchell, who's actually doing pretty well if you look between the lines. You still have Brent Grimes. You have a talented young cornerback in Jamar Taylor, who is getting beat, yes, but you know what? The whole scheme is a mess. Everybody's getting beat. So this coaching staff is a mess. And now I was getting berated earlier a couple of weeks ago when I was asking people, well, who would be your potential replacement? Who would you put in there instead of Joe Philbin? And I said it over and over again. I'm not defending Joe Philbin, and I'm still not defending Joe Philbin, even though I pretty much asked the same question. Who are you going to put in there? You have to have somebody in that head coaching role, even if it winds up being somebody who's already on the coaching staff and he becomes just an interim. You need to have somebody in that role. Supposedly, Darren Rizzi is the only coach on the coaching staff that actually has head coaching experience. I don't remember Darren Rizzi doing that, but apparently
Mason does too,
Can I
right?
interrupt you for a second, Lewis? 'Cause I have a plan. I always
oh
have a
boy,
plan, right?
Mason for head coach.
But yeah, no. You guys may recall I was saying this last year a little bit when there was some question about whether Philbin should be removed, but I would immediately appoint Ken O'Keefe as the head coach of the Dolphins. And I know he does not have NFL head coaching experience, but he's been coaching from somewhere in the neighborhood of 49 to 50 years. He was the Iowa Hawkeyes offensive coordinator for a long time, and he's spent a long time with Kirk Ferentz, who's a highly respected coach, and he would be able to be a guy I feel very confident could be an interim. I absolutely would not suggest that he would be replacing Philbin next year. My thought would be you would keep Coyle and Laser intact because I don't know who you're going to bring in to replace them in the offense or defensive coordinator, but Ken O'Keefe is an offensive-minded guy. He's the guy that's been working with the wide receivers, and I think he could probably take a little bit of control of that offense and put some more sanity back in the offense. I think you've got to send a message to the team. And Omar Kelly, who I obviously rarely agree with, I don't really care for the guy, but he made a comment today that I somewhat did agree with. And his suggestion was, somebody asked him what would he do, and he said, I would immediately cut somebody that's prominent. And that's not a bad idea either, but I think removing Philbin immediately would send a message to the team as well. And I know they're not going to do that before the Jets game, but if they do lose to the Jets, they got to send a message to the team. It's these guys after that Bills game, they just didn't seem like they had the fire or they cared that much, and that is very indicative that they don't like the coaching. Or they, if you don't want to play for a coach, that's what you see out of a team, and that appears to be what's going on right now. And I think a lot of it is just simple trust. And I'll give you some examples of where I think the coaching staff, and you have to point to Philbin because he's the head coach, but how he's losing the trust of his players. And the first thing is like the guys they develop. And here's some examples. So they've developed for 2 years now. They've been developing Damien Williams, and they signed Jonas Gray. And I realized Jonas Gray didn't look bad in the game, but my thought is, so you're telling me you've been working with Damien Williams for 2 years, you signed Jonas Gray off the street a week or two ago, and you're already playing him over Damien Williams. And so it's kind of a head scratcher to me to think, how did you not know 2 years ago until now that Damien Williams was not your number 2 running back if you already just literally picked somebody off the street? That tells me they have more confidence in what New England coached Jonas Gray than what they coached Damien Williams. Another example is we started this game with Jordan Phillips inactive, and I was scratching my head there because he had some pretty good plays in the first 2 games, where he had some impact plays for tackles for losses. And they were starting C.J. Mosley and A.J. Francis over Jordan Phillips. And so I'm thinking they drafted him in the 2nd round, and they picked up C.J. Mosley off the free agent scrap heap for like a low league minimum contract. A.J. Francis has been nothing but a reserve. And so I'm thinking, again, do you not have trust in who you drafted in the 2nd round to get him in there? That tells me, again, you have been unable to coach him and get him ready to play. So you're putting in free agents from another team because you don't trust the guys you coached. Obviously, the guy that was the most direct, impactful losing this game was Bryce McCain. It was painful. I even seen the guys trying to console him on the sidelines because Buffalo was absolutely relentless on him. They threw at him and threw at him and threw at him, and they were throwing it in front of him, and he was missing tackles. They were throwing bombs, and they were completing bombs on him, and they just attacked him. And I got to thinking about that. I'm like, Bryce McCain was a free agent from Pittsburgh who was brought in to play the slot, and they didn't have confidence in Jamar Taylor, who, again, has been with the team for a couple of years. And they don't have confidence to put him in there and start him opposite in the corner, which, again, tells me they have more confidence in a guy that's been coached on another team than their own guys they're developing. And this goes on. And I honestly think that starts to impact the players because they start to think, I've been here for all this time and I've been putting all this work in and I've been trying to listen to these coaches and I've been trying to buy in. But suddenly when it's game time, when it's on the line, the coaches don't believe in their own guys they've been developing. And that sends a horrible message to the team. And that in the play calling itself, they open the game and they run for 4 yards immediately. That was their first play from scrimmage. And then they follow it up with pass. And, I mean, if you look at the Dolphins' statistics on their run-to-pass ratio, it's just unprecedented how much they pass compared to run. And I'm thinking, if you want to fix that, you've got to put some confidence, excuse me, and some trust in your offensive line. And I still, to now, I have no idea in concept. You have to do that. The game is lost. But when they went down to the goal line and threw those 4 straight passes inside the 2, I was thinking, it doesn't matter if you score or not. I'm thinking, what kind of message are you sending to your offensive line if you don't trust them to punch it in for a yard? You know what I mean? It's so. I think that's why they're losing the team, is they keep this continuous cycle of there's just no trust there with the coaches and the players.
It's not even that. I'm not disagreeing with anything you said. I think you're all on point. But if you want us, we can also make the argument that the players themselves have not been playing to their expectations. People will say that it's a mixture of both. What's happening here? We have people on the extremes, and I'm sure you know who I'm talking about. If you know who I'm talking about, just tell me. That pretty much say that all that matters is coaching. It doesn't matter what you have. As long as you find a way to maximize the talent that you do have on your roster, no matter how mediocre it is, you'll find a way to win. So that's why we need better coaching. And that's all that matters. There are those extremists that says, who cares about the players? It's all about coaching. And then you have those people who are all about the players executing, and the coaches aren't really that important because they're not the ones that are on the field missing tackles. Both of them are valid in their own ways. However, their extremes is what makes them wrong. First and goal on the 2-yard line is just logic. Forget trust. This is just logical play calling on. Like any other offensive coordinator in the whole NFL, even the Green Bay Packers would be more willing to do this. With Aaron Rodgers as their quarterback, they'd be more willing to run the ball with Eddie Lacy and just give it a shot at least once before they decide to throw the ball 4 straight times. 4 times it failed, and you didn't run the ball once. You brought up this guy who was a power runner who actually got a few yards. He actually looked like the best running back on the field that game. And you decide that, nah, let's not do that. Let's just throw the ball up 4 times. Why? That doesn't make any sense at all. You have Jonas Gray. You want to talk about the offensive line failing, not having trust in them? Yeah, that's true. And truthfully, I wouldn't trust them either because they've failed horribly. But to not even let them try, that is the ultimate indictment. Bill Lazor has made it a point at this point to say that I don't like running the football. I love passing it. I'm going to continue to pass it, and I don't care what anybody says because running game is overrated.
What I want to know is how much input Joe Philbin has on the offensive side of the ball. Is this
Last year we were complaining that he had input.
Well, is this Lazor or is this Philbin that is telling Lazor how to run the offense? We don't know. Obviously, we don't know what's going on there. But I mean, if it's Lazor who has full control of the offense and is doing whatever he wants, then that guy is a buffoon. I mean, you're right.
Well, it doesn't matter, Matt. It doesn't matter whether it's Lazor that's doing it or it's Philbin.
Well,
Either way, it's
Philbin. It has to be. Right now, the wavelength I'm thinking of is if Philbin gets fired and if Lazor takes over. Is there hope? Because if Lazor is the one calling all this stuff on his own, then there's no hope if he takes over as interim. If he's being
stifled, I personally don't think Coyle or Lazor in any way, shape, or form have earned the position to be the interim head coach. I don't think they're ready for it. I don't think neither unit is performing well, so I don't see why they move them in there. But to me, it has to point back to Philbin because I had this exact thing. On Twitter, I want to say it was yesterday, I had somebody that was disagreeing with me, and they were telling me that Philbin is not the problem, Coyle is the problem.
What?
And I was basically saying it has to be, and they're like, it's the coordinators are the one making those calls, and my thought is Joel Philbin is the head coach of the football team. His job is to step in if he needs to. So if Bill Lazor's calling 4 passes on the goal line on the 1, and that's Bill Lazor doing that, then Joe Philbin does not have the backbone to step in there and say, I don't care what you have called, the next 2 plays you run the football. I don't care which runs you're using, but you're going to run the football.
Chad, I'm not going to accuse him of that because last year we found out that Philbin was actually taking over Lazor's job at times. And I can't imagine that he suddenly just doesn't have that anymore.
No, and I assume that's probably the case, Lewis. But my point is Philbin has to be directly responsible first. So I don't like this. Well, it's Lazor's fault or it's Coyle's fault. No, it has to be Philbin's fault because he has to be. He's the head coach. He hired those coordinators, and it's his job to manage his coordinators. So if his coordinators are doing foolish things,
well, did he really hire Lazor? Because remember, if it were up to Philbin, Mike Sherman would still be in town, which is actually
even if he didn't hire him, it's his job to manage him. I mean, he's overseeing and Philbin's an offensive guy, so you got to blame the offense even more heavily on Philbin.
He's an offensive line. Chad, I'm tired of hearing that, really. He's an offensive line guy, supposedly, who wound up having Aaron Rodgers as his quarterback when he became the offensive coordinator, and it's very hard to screw that up when you have the best quarterback in the whole NFL throwing the football around. Ryan Tannehill, as much as we love him, is not Aaron Rodgers, nor will he ever be.
All right, so going along with that, Lewis, that means he doesn't know how to run an offense or defense then.
Correct.
Because, I mean, he's obviously not a defensive guy. And so he doesn't have a history of calling as a defensive coordinator. He was the offensive coordinator for the Packers, but he didn't call plays. And so my question is, how is he then credentialed to be the head coach if he can't run an offense or defense?
He's not.
And so that's where I get like issued with Philbin with that. And so yeah, I have to blame those things on Philbin to start with. Now, I mean, you can go on and on about all the things, but again, to me, it all has to come back to trust in what are they doing. And so, you know, we've talked extensively about the players that have got in there shining, like Rashard Matthews. He's been in the doghouse for a couple of years, and he's one of the few bright spots on the team right now.
And so you wonder, he's not going to stick around hurts me.
I want him to stick around, guys. I want
to pay him now. Pay him now while he's still relatively cheap.
It's just not realistic, unfortunately. And I wish it was. And I know people think I'm crazy for pushing to trade Matthews now because his value is getting higher and higher. But I don't think Matthews himself is going to come back. For one, he's been unhappy. Him and Philbin have obviously had issues in the past because he's been suspended and everything else. And two is there's just no way that the number starting wide receivers aren't going to be Devontae Parker and Jarvis Landry. And so, and I mean, Kenny Stills is under contract for a couple more years. And
Kenny Stills has been demoted.
Kenny Stills is not playing well. I understand that, but from a contract standpoint, I just don't. I mean, how are they going to give him a bunch of money after the Sue and the Tannehill contracts, and they have Hazel coming up? It's affordable. I don't realistically see why Rashard Matthews, who probably at this point, the way he's playing, is going to get offered a free agent contract that's solid, and he's going to be the probably at worst the number 2 wide receiver on a football team. Why would he not just leave town, take the money, and go start somewhere, rather than maybe be the number 3 guy in Miami?
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying it hurts.
But the frustrating part is, to me, that he's breaking out right now. And so, again, you got to wonder about coaching. Is like, okay, so last year we were struggling with Gibson and Hartline and those guys, and Matthews was hardly seeing the field. And all of a sudden he's breaking out now. And the same thing with Jelani Jenkins. You know, we got to see Donnell Ellerbe and all those guys in front of him. And, I mean, Jelani Jenkins clearly is our best linebacker right now. And those guys aren't even, like, getting the chance to go out there and perform. And that was the point I was making with the trust factor is my personal opinion is Jamar Taylor is a better boundary corner than Bryce McCain because he's a far superior tackler. And you saw firsthand how bad that Bryce McCain was having tackling in this game. There were several plays where it'd be 3rd down and like 8, and they were throwing about a 5 or 6 yard button hook in front of Bryce McCain, and the receiver was just simply getting a couple more yards on him because he couldn't come up and make the tackle. Jamar Taylor can do that, and I feel like Devontae Parker, I realize he didn't get much time in the preseason, but again, that's on the coaches. They've got to get him ready. He's been there for, what, like 5 weeks now, 6 weeks now, where he's been active. You've got to get him in the offense and get him productive. And they, again, when they start Greg Jennings, Jarvis Landry, and Rashard Matthews as their 3 wide receiver set, why would any team respect the deep ball with those 3 guys on the field? I mean, none of those guys have the ability to stretch the field, where the guys that can are Devontae Parker and Kenny Stills. It's not making sense to me, and I start to question, wouldn't Devontae Parker be the best option to put in there with Jarvis Landry? I mean, I think any fan right now would say absolutely the 3 best wide receivers on the team right now would be Devontae Parker, Jarvis Landry, and Rashard Matthews. That should be your starting 3. I think any of them would tell you that Jordan Phillips should be starting opposite of Ndamukong Suh right now. I mean, that's just what I think all the fans are thinking, that why wouldn't these guys be playing? And I know he's made some mistakes. I still think in the long run, if you've been playing him from the get-go, I still think Billy Turner would be a better choice than Dallas Thomas, who, again, had a critical penalty in this game. And so I think where it's going is people are questioning who is making these decisions, and are they starting the best talent on the team even on the field?
Well, if you listen to Philbin, the answer is yes. They always start the best 46 they feel is possible to help them win the game. Yeah, sure, let's go with that. Let's say I think what it is that, we don't get to see practices anymore. We get to see training camp, and that's the end of that. You know what it might be, and this is just me thinking out loud. I think what it is that whoever happens to perform the best in practice that week gets to play on Sunday, which is dumb beyond belief. Because you know what? I'm going to hark back to something that it was 2011, and I believe it was. And you know what? People are going to get mad at me for bringing it up because just who it is that I'm bringing up. But Tim Tebow was an absolutely horrific practice player. He sucked he sucked even more in practice than he normally does in a game, and yet somehow, some way, the Broncos went 7-4 with him as the starting quarterback. So in the games, he performed better than he did in practice. Jelani Jenkins is not a good practice player. He balls out when the game starts. Matt Moore is a terrible practice quarterback. He does better when the game starts. There are just these kinds of players who happen to play better when the game is on the line. Not necessarily in practice when it's like, whatever. If I mess up, no big deal. It's this different mindset. I don't understand why you have to be the top performer in practice in order to get to play. So that would mean, let's say that we're still speculating here. Let's say that the reason Jordan Phillips was inactive, even though he's actually the second most talented defensive lineman in my mind on the whole team. I think Earl Mitchell is more NFL ready, but Jordan Phillips is much more talented, and he has a higher ceiling than Earl Mitchell does. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that Jordan Phillips was the worst practice defensive tackle in the game on the roster this past week. That would mean that Francis and Mosley did better in practice than Phillips, and as a result, they decided that, well, we're going to make Phillips inactive because Francis and Mosley did better in practice. That is a bunch of baloney. I like A.J. Francis a lot. I think he can do stuff, but he cannot do it. He should not be doing it over players who are more talented than him. Kelvin Shepard, the same thing. I said over and over again, I think Kelvin Shepard's ceiling is Zach Vigil's floor. Zach Vigil has a lot of talent to be a really good player, and I understand the whole point that Ian made last week about his functional NFL strength, but guess what? Kelvin Shepard does not know how to play middle linebacker at a starting linebacker level. I would much rather let Zach Vigil get his lumps, get him to learn the speed of the game now, make him ready for when it's next year and we need a linebacker. Because right now it's looking like with our first round draft pick, we're going to have to go after a linebacker. But I am not convinced until I see Zach Vigil absolutely fall apart that we need a linebacker in the first round. A linebacker would help because we know for sure what we would be getting. At least we hope we do. We've had a few first-round busts, cough, cough, Deion Jordan. But if we want to go in and get like Miles Jack or somebody like that, and I'm not honestly, if it keeps this up, we may wind up getting a first overall pick because we can't seem to get off the ground without losing like 14 points first. If we get somebody like Miles Jack for instance, we would have our middle linebacker and we would be good to go, supposedly, because we still got Jelani Jenkins on one side, and assuming Cole Amisi sticks around, we have him on the other side. And that would fix the linebacker problem, because the middle linebacker is really the biggest weakness we have. Misi's okay, and Jenkins is good. Shepard is horrendous, and as a result, the whole linebacker core is terrible. But here's the other thing: we're going to need cornerbacks soon. At this point, I'm looking that Brent Grimes is not going to be on the team next year, and I would love for Brent to stay. I'm not going to say the same about Miko, and everybody knows what happened with her recently. I'm not going to bring that up again. But Brent is still the best corner in the league. He's the not in the league. I'm sorry, on the team. He's the only guy we can actually count on right now besides Rashad Jones. Grimes is still good, and he's shown that as teams refuse to throw in his direction. And yet we're saying that cornerback is a need because we don't have anybody besides Grimes. And if we remove Grimes, then that means literally the only guy we can count on, and that's the whole secondary, is Rashad Jones. And Rashad Jones can't even cover well. So that would mean we need two starting cornerbacks, because we're not sold on Jamar Taylor. I think he can be good, but he's not getting his shot at actually playing as a starter. He has to be rotated in with Bryce McCain, who can't play on the boundary. You have we don't even have Will Davis anymore because they traded him for a 6th-round draft pick. Oh, good job, Miami Dolphins, on that one. I don't think you should have done that, because Will Davis has talent. You just don't want to try and let him get his lumps in. You want to try the practice route again. So you're going to have Jamar Taylor. You have Bobby McCain, who could probably be the slot guy next year if you want to go move on from Bryce McCain, which I think we should at this point, because he can't seem to do anything right unless he's in the slot, which is where he should be. Again, Kevin Coyle, Joe Philbin, get with it. Then you have Michael Thomas, who's a safety. And you have Walt Aikens, who is also a safety and not doing well as it is, because he's talented, but he wasn't ready to play. So you could bring back Louis Delmas again. Supposedly he's already walking around, and now that he's on injured reserve, there's no way he's going to wind up being rushed back, because he's not going to be allowed to be rushed back. He's going to get his recovery whether he wants to or not. So you could potentially bring him back and let us see what he can do there. And other than that, you got nothing.
Here's the thing, though, Lewis, is I'm not so sure you're right. I'm not so sure that Jamar Taylor isn't a solid corner. And I'm not so sure that Walt Aikens and Michael Thomas aren't solid safeties. I think I'm wondering.
What I'm saying is right now, Chad, right now is that they're not ready now because they haven't been able to play.
Well, I'm questioning whether they're being correctly used. And so, I mean, I'm looking at a game where, you know, we've had in consecutive weeks, we've seen Jared Ogrick pretty much end the game on the Dolphins by beating Jason Fox and getting a sack. And this game we saw Charles Clay tear us up, and we saw Chris Hogan tear us up, who wasn't he a practice squad guy that was in training camp for the Dolphins?
7-11, that's him, right?
He scored a touchdown on us in that game, and so, you know, that's a player that couldn't even make Miami squad. And so I got to wonder, like, you know, if our players were being used differently, is it just the players, or do the coaches know what they're doing with their players? And so
they don't.
I'm still caught up on. I understand. I can accept Walt Aikens and Michael Thomas struggling a little bit, because the plan was for Louis Delmas to start, and he got hurt, and so that goes with the territory. Those guys were his backups. They're young, and so they're working on it. But I'm still not getting that. You know, Jamar Taylor was slotted to be that second corner. He didn't make it, and so my question is:
Was he that
bad? What was the reason? Because Bryce McCain just got tore up. I mean, and the last 2 games he got tore up. I mean, when Jacksonville was getting the ball down the field to Allen Robinson in that first half, that was Bryce McCain they were throwing the ball up on. Clearly, Buffalo took note of that, and they did the same exact thing. They attacked him. And so I guess my question is like, all right, you drafted in the second round Jamar Taylor. When you draft a guy in the second round, you're bringing him in to be a starter for your team. They've had all this time to get him ready, and apparently they just don't believe they got him ready. That's what it gets me, because they're putting in a guy who was a free agent, and Bryce McCain never was a starting outside cornerback. The Dolphins just threw him in there because apparently they thought he was better than Jamar Taylor. And I'm highly questioning that right now, because obviously, could have Jamar Taylor done any worse in that Buffalo game than what Bryce McCain was doing if he'd have been playing in that position? And so I don't understand their lack of trust in their own ability to develop people. I mean, they're just so quick to throw in another team's free agent than the own guys they're bringing in drafted to develop. That's very frustrating to me that I just don't get it. I mean, you would think most coaches want to start their own guys. You know, they want to have the players that they drafted, that they developed, that know their system. And the Dolphins consistently don't do that. I mean, just Jonas Gray, again, I realize Jonas Gray had a good game, but I'm really thinking, why in the world wasn't Damian Williams getting all those carries? Was he that bad? And they just are now realizing that he's not capable of being the number 2 back just now, that they've got to sign a free agent and throw him in there right away. It seems like desperation to me that they don't have any confidence in their own ability to develop players.
I don't have an answer for you, Chad. All I can tell you is all I can do is just hark back to what we've seen before. Donnell Ellerbe was the starting linebacker for the Dolphins in 2012 and 2013, and he absolutely was it 2000? No, it wasn't 2012. I'm sorry, it was 2013, and he started as 2014. And the moment Ellerbe got hurt, Jenkins came in and balled out. Why? Why did he ball out? Was he this good to begin with? Was it hidden by the fact that he didn't perform well in practice? This is the problem. I hear from, and I can't believe I have to bring up Omar Kelly again. Omar Kelly was actually right all day long, which I have to check my brain for reality. I have to give myself a reality check because, oh my God, I'm agreeing with Omar all day long. This is crazy. But he was right about this. Today he was right all along. We pretty much, and everybody on Twitter agreed. It wasn't like everybody was calling out Omar for being dumb. All the people that I respect, there's a ton of people I respect, and they're all looking at Omar's tweets and saying, oh my God, he's right. I can't believe it. And that just means that at this point, it has gotten so bad that even the people, like the reasonable people, not the ones who say that Ryan Tannehill is the issue and he needs to go, because I see people saying that Chad Henne is better, which is ridiculous. But the smart people, the reasonable people, the people who are willing to look at things, Omar included, we're all unanimous in this one aspect of the game, is that they're playing the wrong people and they're putting them in the wrong positions, and they're not putting them in positions to succeed. Joe Philbin and Kevin Coyle and Bill Lazor are all out here putting in these random veterans who they feel would do better than their young players, because I don't know. All I can think of is that it's a result of practice. I guess Jonas Gray did better in practice than Damian Williams, and as a result, he earned his spot as the number 2 running back, and he got the few carries that were actually made last game. I can only assume that Bryce McCain does better in practice than Jamar Taylor, and that's why he had to get burned 3 times in order for Jamar Taylor to even be rotated in as the boundary guy, and even then Bryce McCain wound up in the nickel, so he was still on the field. I can only assume that C.J. Mosley and A.J. Francis did better than Jordan Phillips, and that's why Phillips was inactive.
But you see, what I'm going with that is that even if that's the case, that to me is like the coaching staff admitting we are not able to get these guys ready to play. We can either not put together schemes that will allow these guys to succeed, or we can't get them developed. Because, I mean, it's ridiculous. And again, I'm not harping on Jonas Gray. I liked it when they got him. They need a power runner. They never really were able to get a power runner after Noshan got hurt. But I'm looking at that, I'm thinking, how in the world is he ready in 2 weeks and Damian Williams is not ready? What have they been doing with Damian Williams in practice that they suddenly, out of desperation, are throwing Jonas Gray in there? I was like shocked. I'm like, how in the world does that happen? That you don't see that happen on other football teams. And Omar, again, I don't usually care for him, but he's making valid points with Bryce McCain. Are they putting him even in a position to succeed? Because again, he has not been an outside cover corner in his career. He's been a slot corner. And when they brought him over here, he was brought over here to be a slot corner. And it feels like desperation that they just aren't confident in their own ability to get Jamar Taylor ready. I look at the linebackers, and last year their big move was to put Cole Messi at middle linebacker. And that was all last year. I mean, you guys all remember that. And so this year, suddenly, Cole Messi is not the middle linebacker anymore, and they're putting in Shepard. I mean, Shepard was just a free agent scrap heap pickup. He's not a starting caliber linebacker. Every team in the NFL knows that, but they don't feel like Cole Messi's able to hold down the starting linebacker spot. I mean, so in the inside, and so I question, like, how could he have been appointed the starter last year, and he no longer is capable of being the starter this year? It's not like they picked up some new.
Supposedly Chad, supposedly the issue is not so much with Cole Messi. It's more about who's the alternative at the strong side linebacker spot. They don't have faith in Chris McCain, which I can understand.
Okay, so last year the starting strong side linebacker was Philip Wheeler. They could have. Is he even on a team right now?
No. Wait, is he on the 49ers? Or did he get cut?
Well, he got cut at one point, and so I'm looking at that and saying, okay, so last year their evaluation was Philip Wheeler was their best strong side linebacker, and Cole Messi was their best inside linebacker. I would completely understand if Miami brought in some new inside linebacker that was a stud. If they had a great inside linebacker and they moved Cole Messi back outside, that makes sense. But they didn't bring anybody new in. They literally are switching to Kelvin Shepard in the middle in place of Cole Messi, and it just doesn't make sense. I mean, when you're starting to think about it, it's like, do they know what they're doing? Because they're just like jumping around and throwing people in there, and it's like desperation because they can't figure out what to do to make things work. And so that's just what it appears to me on the surface. Now, I can't say what goes on in practice, but I just have such a hard time believing that a veteran like Shepard has changed so much from last year to this year that their plan going into the season was that, Shepard will be fine in the middle. We'll just move Cole Messi back to strong side. No, that tells me they were not able to get Chris McCain coached to play strong side linebacker, or they don't know how to make a scheme to allow Chris McCain to succeed. So they, again, are going to rely on another team's coaching of Shepard and leave him in the middle.
Well, hold on a second, Chad. Matt, didn't you say that it wasn't the coach's idea to put Shepard there?
Oh, I think we lost Matt.
Matt, hello. You could have at least muted before we went. I remember Matt saying something along the lines of that it was Tannenbaum in the front office who wanted Shepard in the middle, and the coaches actually did not want that, which tells me that there's once again some disconnect between the front office and the coaching staff.
Yeah, they're absolutely your GM should not be dictating who's playing what positions. And so if that's the case, they've got dysfunction then because the GM doesn't trust their coaches. So again, the trust just is not there, and I think that is the foundation of why Miami is failing right now, because what does it tell your players when the guys that have come and drafted and put all the time in the weight room, in the practice field, in the training camps, learning your schemes, buying into your system, when it becomes game time, you literally just grab other guys and throw them in their place. It tells me that they don't have confidence even in themselves as coaches, because I mean, I coach Pee Wee football, and I'm playing the guys that I've been coaching. I wouldn't just go grab a random kid and say, you look a little bit faster, I'm going to play you instead right at game time. I mean, that's what it feels like what the Dolphins are doing, and they just don't have that direction right now. That's why I think Philbin is literally on the hot seat, because it's starting to feel like there is no real leader on this is what we're doing. These are our guys, and these are the guys we're going to go to war with. It just feels like that didn't work. Let's try this. That didn't work. Let's try this. It feels like they're still in the experimental stage from the training camp versus being in week 4 of the NFL season.
I don't get it either, Chad. If it were me, this is just GM Louis Sung is gonna do some things right now. If it were me, I would have let Chris McCain try to take his lumps at the strong side linebacker spot using his pass rushing skills. And I realized that he didn't do well in training camp. He didn't do well in the preseason. But you know what? Kelvin Shepard, I would rather have Chris McCain at the strong side linebacker with Misi in the middle than have Shepard there in the middle with Misi on the strong side, because at this point, I'm just looking at it, and I would not be willing to let quote Kelvin Shepard start another game at middle linebacker, because he just doesn't have the instincts, he doesn't have the speed, he cannot cover well at all. The only thing he's
and you're failing anyway. I mean, they're not playing
and they're failing.
Yeah, and so, and I look at it from the end game, and so you got to look at, let's say Miami did string some games together and they get back in the playoff race. Well, when you get into those late November, December games, and you're playing some critical games, and let's say you're playing the Patriots, do you really want to be going to war against the Patriots in a critical game with Kelvin Shepard still in the middle, or would you rather have had Chris McCain playing all year, have him improved throughout the whole year, and suddenly you've got a far superior athlete in there to play strong side linebacker and Cole? I mean, you just want your best possible team as the season progresses, and Devontae Parker is the same exact scenario. Do you really want to try to outscore Tom Brady with Greg Jennings as your wide receiver, or would you rather have Devontae Parker in sync and ready to go so you can have a guy that can make some big plays? And it feels like they're so hepped up on the system. It's all about the system, and it's not about the players that they have on their team. And I feel like a coach's job is to adjust his game plan and his strategy to fit the players they have. You know, whether you have a talented line or whether you have talented wide receivers, whatever you have to tailor your game plan to fit what you have. And I feel like Philbin, under no circumstance, will sway away from his system. And so I was making this comment coming into this game that, all right, so you've lost your tight end. You know, so they lost Deion Sims, which is a big blow because they can't run a lot of their two tight end set that they were planning to run. And Jordan Cameron, you know, he had a tweaked hammy, wasn't it? He had a minor injury, and so he was questionable coming into the game. And so the point I'm making is, why don't you take Billy Turner? Granted, I know Billy Turner, maybe he isn't your top 5 offensive lineman, but put him in there as tight end eligible, run 6 linemen, and try to pound the football a little bit. That, to me, made a lot more sense than trying to run your same system with Jake Stonebrenner in there and Jason Fox trying to block the Buffalo defensive ends. But Philbin is so caught up and so stubborn on his system, he just will not go away from it. And it doesn't matter if it's raining. We saw that in this game. You know, we were in that first quarter when it started raining. One of those interceptions was a really hard slant pass to Jarvis Landry that he tipped up into the air. Buffalo picked it off. And I was thinking, when that rain started to come in, I'm thinking, don't drop back and start throwing a lot of these high precision, high velocity passes. That's exactly what happens. The ball's wet. But again, they won't shift out of their system. They should have shifted into a more of a power run formation and tried to run the ball a little bit there, if anything, just to try to control the possession of the clock a little bit and not just go 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. And you just don't see it. And I just don't think Philbin will go away from that. But these teams that we're playing now, they have so much film, and they're so prepared for that 3 tight end set where they run their motion and they just don't shift out of that hardly at all. And teams are so in tune with that. And you see the teams playing right now, and nobody is respecting the deep ball because Miami so rarely throws a deep ball. And I don't know if that's Tannehill or if that's coaching. And they also don't respect the run. They're sitting tight on the receivers because they're trying to defend the short pass. And you correct me if I'm wrong, Lewis, but it feels like Miami on offense, they're continually trying to force short passes into tight coverage. That's what Tannehill is always doing right now, is they're trying to force tight passes into tight coverage. And that's what happens when you do that all the time. You get intercepted or you don't convert drives because you're literally playing your offense into the defense. Even though their defense is defending what you're trying to do, you're still doing it anyway, rather than trying to dictate a new scheme to make them change their scheme.
And that's the thing, man. I would say you're right that the Dolphins have been basically, let's make Tannehill thread the needle on every play. And by the way, let's make him do it with little to no O-line and zero running game whatsoever to speak of. This is what happens when you don't have a balanced offense. You're absolutely right. It's like, never mind respecting the run. Chad, they don't even run the ball for them to have to even attempt to respect it. Like,
it's a huge problem, and that's why I feel bad, because people are saying our offensive line is terrible, and I'm thinking, well, it's hard to play offensive line when the defense is playing nothing but pass, because the defense
they pin their ear back. They pin their ears back from start to finish.
And it's not even because they're like dominated our running game. It's just because, like, statistically, they know that Miami just does not want to run the football. And so if you're just like betting, that's part of when you're calling a defense. You're trying to guess what the offense is going to do. I mean, I wouldn't be calling many run defenses if I'm playing the Dolphins, because I'm thinking it's so unlikely they're going to run. In particular, if Miami has a failed run. Like, if they try to run the ball and they only gain a yard or two, I would immediately call pass defense the rest of that down, until they got another first down, because there's no way Miami is going to run again if they had a failed run. They just don't do it. And that's just, to me, that's being very, very predictable. And when you're calling predictable offensive plays, that's putting your guys into a difficult position. It's hard for a wide receiver to get good separation from a defensive back when they're playing up tight and they're really looking for short passes. And it's hard for an offensive lineman to block when the defense knows it's going to be a pass. And so when those defensive ends come off the ball, they're not even worried about the run. They're just trying to rush the passer. And then when you've got guys that aren't, great players, like Jason Fox. Jason Fox has never been a dominant left offensive tackle.
He's never been a left offensive tackle, period, not in the NFL at least.
Right. And so in Miami is so frequently not helping him. They're leaving him out there, and they're putting Jordan Cameron out in routes, and they're expecting him to consistently block elite NFL defensive ends who know Miami's going to pass. And you could put Richmond Webb out there in his prime, and if the defensive ends know every single down Miami's going to pass,
or at least the healthy Brandon Albert,
yeah, they're going to struggle too, because the defense knows that they're trying to pass, and so it just puts them in a difficult situation. And most coaches would do something like I'm talking about. They would say, all right, we've got Jason Fox. He's not a great left tackle. I'm going to limit the number of formations we line up in that expose a defense to be able to attack him. So I'm going to, maybe I'm going to put an extra lineman over there with him, or I'm going to put a bigger tight end over there with him, and we're just going to run a little bit more.
We don't have tight ends right now. That's another problem.
Well, that was my point in saying, why don't you put in Billy Turner? I know this is kind of ironic and funny, but just run a little bit of Wildcat or something, because you've got to do something to keep the defense off balance, because coming into a game where they've done nothing but prepare for the offensive play sets that you're going to run is immediately putting you at a disadvantage. And so my thought was, well, if you're running a 6-lineman set, you're still able to put your 3 wide receivers out there. And in particular, if you're using guys like Devontae Parker, are they going to single cover him then down the field, or are they still going to respect him with the safety? Because it becomes harder for them to respect him with the safety if you got your 6 linemen up there and you're pounding the football at them. But that, to me, that's just trying to keep it unbalanced. Try to throw some new stuff at them and things that they're not ready for. But I can't remember a time when Joe Philbin left his just standard, here's my 3 wide receiver set with a tight end. We're going to run that 70-80% of the time, and we might work in a little bit of double tight end here and there, but under no circumstance are we going to go heavy line and try to pound the football forward like on the goal line. If you'll watch the film, I haven't had a chance to watch it, but I saw it in the game. There was a formation when Buffalo had a 3rd and 1, I want to say it was, where they had a short yardage situation. They brought in a formation where they didn't have 1 wide receiver on the field. They just had nothing but power blocking. And I don't understand why Miami wouldn't do that at times when they've got those situations like on the goal line.
And you brought in Jonas Gray specifically to be that kind of running back. That, I think, was the biggest sin that they committed that whole game. You literally brought in Jonas Gray, let him run the ball a couple of times, and then you're on 1st and goal at the 2-yard line, and you didn't let Jonas Gray do what he's known to do. That was just
Yeah, it doesn't make sense, and that's why I was frustrated. I was sitting in the game, and I looked up and I saw inactives Billy Turner and Jordan Phillips, and I tweeted that, and I just said shaking my head. I'm just like, it doesn't make sense. Like, why? They need Billy Turner in that game as a sixth lineman to help them power on the football. And as soon as I saw that he was inactive, that was just telling me, I'm like, they're not even going to be attempting on like a 3rd and 1 or a 3rd and short. They're going to be coming out there, spread out, 3-4 wide receivers, and they try to throw the football. And I'm just thinking, oh, it's just so frustrating.
the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And we have witnessed insanity for the past 2 years in Miami. We're going to transition just a little bit because we're still going to be talking about generally the same thing. But I asked earlier today which one they would prefer at this point in time. And I asked, and I said, and I tweeted this, if I had a gun to my head and I was told choose one between two coaches, Joe Philbin and Tony Sparano, I said I would pick Tony Sparano. Because at the very least, neither of them were very good at preparing. Tony Sparano does not have the football IQ necessary to be an NFL head coach. Joe Philbin, but you know what? His players played for him. They wanted to fight for him. They went to war for Tony Sparano. There was a tweet last year when I wrote my column about being a leader of men, and people said, and there was this one guy who tweeted that said, I would go to war for Tony Sparano. I wouldn't go to Publix for Joe Philbin. And it seems to be this kind of mentality now. And mind you, the people who agreed with me about Tony Sparano also had to have this like disclaimer that said Tony Sparano is not a good coach either. I mean, like, okay, fine, you have your little disclaimer. I understand Tony Sparano wasn't a good coach. He had his own flaws. But if you ask me, Tony Sparano, a lot of the time, it was a victim of poor talent on his team. We forget how bad Chad Henne was. We forget that Chad Henne currently, check down Chad, is the backup to Blake Bortles in Jacksonville. That's about as bad as it gets. And truth be told, with Blake Bortles as your starter, and then you got Chad Henne as your backup, and people are dreading the idea of Blake Bortles getting hurt because that would mean they'd have to put check down Chad in there. Let's just look at it from the first year Tony Sparano was supposedly the head coach. He had Bill Parcells in there, maybe whispering in his ear. I don't know how. I know that Parcells was part of the whole chat. I'm sorry, I pushed the wrong button. I realized that Parcells was part of the whole reason that Pennington came to Miami in the first place. I understand that Parcells had a lot to do with what the team did as a whole that year. But it was still Sparano doing a lot of that stuff, and then you have the Wildcat running, you have Chad Pennington, who is a very good clean quarterback, and they went and they managed to go to the playoffs for the first time in a very long time. 2008 was the last time, and that was the one year that Chad Pennington was the starting quarterback for the Miami Dolphins. And then Chad Henne shows up, takes over, and all of a sudden the Dolphins are terrible again, and we're blaming Sparano. We do remember that Chad Henne was absolutely god-awful, right? We do remember that Brandon Marshall kept saying we were a quarterback away, right? And that for Marshall to say that, that's basically saying, look, we had all the talent we wanted. We just didn't have a quarterback. I said today, and I will continue to say it, if Sparano had this roster, we're in the playoffs. Because if nothing else, they would go to war for him.
Yeah, I don't disagree that Sparano is a better motivator, and that's clearly one of Philbin's weaknesses, I would say. And
you need to have a personality to be a motivator.
Yeah, and I listened to him after like the games, like when they get wins and stuff. You can go onto the Miami Dolphins website and hear him in the locker room. And it's like he just I don't know that he just gets that aspect of the game. And I mean, a lot of fans feel it. You get into the games and it gets down to the wire, and those games get violent, and there's a lot of passion and emotion in them. And you just don't. I don't know if Joe Philbin ever gets that. If he ever really gets that emotional. But so I mean, that's a weakness, and Sperano clearly did. I mean, to the point people made fun of him when he's out there chest pounding field goals. But I mean, clearly he was in tune with the emotion of the game, and, winning and losing, and the players did go to war for him. Now, the issue is I don't think either one of those coaches are head coaching material. I don't think Tony Sperano understood offensive, philosophy well enough with the new NFL. Tony Sperano was still trying to run the 80s Giants offense, in my opinion, where you get the big offensive lineman, you wear him down, and you play really good defense, and you win the game in the fourth quarter when you can slam the ball down their throat.
That's fair.
And they just didn't have it. Now, you're right that Tony Sperano didn't have a great quarterback, but they didn't have the skill players. And Philbin is completely the reverse, where he went fully finesse. So they've clearly invested into wide receivers. They spent a lot of time developing their quarterback, but they just don't have the compassion there, right? But to me, it's they just need to do fundamental football, and the Dolphins haven't been doing it for a few years. They're so in tune to that system that's why my personal thought is this is the most I felt like it might be time, because this season can still be salvaged, in my opinion, because I feel like we have a team that if they're just put a coach in that just does fundamental football, I think they're going to be a highly competitive team and they could get right back into it. But I think with Joe Philbin in there, I just don't see the light at the end of the tunnel where, they may go beat the Jets and come right back and beat the Titans and be 3-2, but I just don't feel like even if that happens with Philbin, I don't feel like they're going to be a legitimate playoff contender. And that's why I'm saying, put a guy like Ken O'Keefe in there, because he has so many years of head coaching experience. At least he'll know to run a power formation on the goal line when you got a yard to go, and he'll get that touchdown. And he may not be, the next coming of Gary Payton or anything like that, but the team is so good.
Gary Payton or Sean Payton?
Or I'm sorry, Sean Payton. Forgive me.
I was like,
not the basketball player, the coach, Sean Payton. I'm just saying that, just do things that make legitimate sense. Try to balance your run game with the passing game. And the team is so talented that they'll win games. And this defense, you want to fix the defense, fix the offense, because the defense has not won series yet this season been able to play one-sided football. They haven't got to had a situation where the team has had to pass. And that's what this team is built to do. Cameron Wake is an elite pass rusher. Olivier Vernon's a pretty good pass rusher, but they're average run defenders. Our linebackers are not very good run defenders. And so you want to take pressure off those guys, force other teams to throw the football, and suddenly we have a defense that's much more capable of defending the pass. And it would turn things around drastically, but you've got to at least get some creativity on offense. You've got to at least bring some sanity back to your short yardage games, and you've got to get the trust of the players. And I don't know how to do that without having Philbin go. I mean, I wish there was like a magic way, because I don't think Ross...
You don't have a magic potion. If you had one, you would use it.
I don't, and so the only way I can think of to motivate...
You didn't listen to his press conference, did you?
No, did he say he's looking for the magic potion?
No, he's basically said, I don't have a magic potion. If I had one, I would have used it. It's like you know, magic potion. No, you don't have a magic potion, Joe Philbin. No, you don't. Nobody does. They just have, ability to coach.
Right.
They have the ability to adapt. They have the ability to not be stubborn as a mule and realize that things are not working.
But, with that being said, I like Joe Philbin as a guy. I think
he's a very nice man. He's a very, very nice man.
He is, and I think Stephen Ross likes Joe Philbin. And Stephen Ross wants so bad for Joe Philbin to succeed, but you start to reach that point where it's like it just doesn't look like it's going to happen. And when I look at this Jets game, if Miami goes in and they get beat, no matter how it happens, where they get blown out or where they get beat by a last-second field goal,
they'll get beat.
I don't see how the Dolphins are going to get back into that playoff race very easily, because, that is a home game, and that Buffalo game is a home game. So now you're going to have to go into Buffalo. You're going to have to go into New York and win those games just to try to split those series. And you're probably going to have to sweep the Patriots to have any realistic shot of winning the East. or you're going to have to win some pretty difficult games to get into that 10-6, 11-5 range. When you've already got 3 losses, I don't see them being in a position where it's very likely to make the playoffs. And so if they're going to have any chance of making the playoffs, it feels like you got to think about making the change. And if they don't, I don't think Stephen Ross can afford, from a fan base, to even consider bringing Joe Philbin back next year without a playoff berth. And I don't see that being feasible at 1-3. So I don't know where Stephen Ross and Mike Tannenbaum and Dennis Hickey, where they're seeing the direction and future of this team going with keeping Philbin there, because obviously Philbin is going to continue to try to win throughout the whole season at all costs. And I don't think that winning at all costs may be where this team wants to go if they lose the Jets. To me, you want to keep your young players in there and start getting them ready. Maybe for later this season if you can pull a few wins up, but definitely next season. So, if it's me, I'm pretty much playing Devontae Parker all the time. I'm playing Jordan Phillips all the time. I'm playing Zach Vigil all the time. And I don't think Philbin will do that. And I don't know what you think, Lewis, but I just don't see Philbin being willing to do that. And it's crazy to think of it your head coach, but people talk about players being progress stoppers, but Joe Philbin suddenly, if they lose to the Jets, starts becoming a progress stopper.
Unless Stephen Ross was lying when he said that he doesn't care anymore, he just wants to make sure they win. If the Dolphins don't make the playoffs, which I don't think they will at this point, Joe Philbin will be fired unless Stephen Ross is a liar. And Stephen Ross has issues with making football decisions. Stephen Ross sometimes has issues staying out of his own way. But one thing that I have never gotten from Stephen Ross is that he is a liar. So
no, I think Stephen Ross just is. He's very limited on understanding football, and I can even see that when he talks about the team. He's not a hands-on owner whatsoever, which I prefer. I don't like the Jerry Jones of the world where they're trying to run the football team. I would rather have an owner that lets a qualified guy that knows football players much better run the football team. But the impression I get from Stephen Ross is he will do whatever it takes to win. He's trying hard to win. He just doesn't know what to do to get there. And I think one of the biggest problems they had, and one of the reasons we have Joe Philbin right now as head coach, was Jeff Ireland, because I said this before, and I wish I had a better word, but I fully believe Jeff Ireland was a real prick. I think he was very condescending. I think he had to be his way or the highway. And I think because Stephen Ross had him in there as the GM of the team, I think it limited his ability to get coaches. And so I don't think many coaches were going to come and coach under Jeff Ireland, with Jeff Ireland having all the power to call the shots. With Jeff Ireland out of there now, and with Dennis Hickey in there and Mike Tannenbaum, and in particular having Tannehill, I'm not definitely on the Tannehill hater card. I think Tannehill's doing a pretty good job considering. That's what I would say.
Considering, that's you always have to add that little asterisk. He's doing well considering. Imagine if we gave him what he freaking needed. This is the other argument.
Have what he needs, which is even more crazy, but. It's just they're not letting him utilize the team that
he doesn't have what he needs, man. You know why? Because the O-line is still a mess. In fact, it's worse than ever before.
They're not doing their offensive line any favors, though. As I would just say, maybe run the football a little bit more in power sets.
Yeah, there's an idea.
And protects Tannehill a little bit more. Maybe have him not get killed every game. That'd be a change. But my thought though is from a head coach standpoint, having a quality quarterback is pretty appealing to a head coach, because you can come to Miami right now and you have Ndamukong Suh there, you have Tannehill there, you've got Devontae Parker and Jarvis Landry there. You've got a pretty solid framework of a good football team that if you just come in and have a decent offseason, you're right up there with a competitive football team. They're by no means coming into a start from ground zero rebuilding project.
Well, that depends, Chad, because for all we know, whoever comes in next may not want to deal with the salary cap hell that Hickey and Tannenbaum have put us in. And this is the other thing that was brought up, is that when people say they want people fired, they don't just mean Coyle and Laser and Philbin. No, they want everybody Everybody
Well,
fired.
if Philbin goes, to me, you're bringing in an interim because they have nothing to lose by playing the younger guys, and you want to give them a chance to, see what they can do. But more importantly, is you've got to have somebody that spends the time with the younger players, and the following season after that, it's going to be house cleaning. I don't see very few coaches at all on the staff staying.
I'm not talking about coaches though, Chad. I'm talking about everybody, Hickey and Tannenbaum included. They
No,
want M fired too.
That's not going to happen. And to be fair, I don't see why you would. I don't see what Hickey and Tannenbaum have done wrong that you're going to blame them.
Well, you could say they didn't bring in a middle linebacker. We brought that up earlier.
Well, they didn't, but I mean, with that being said, they didn't bring any of the staffing or the coaching in either. And so I'm not giving them a complete free pass, but Tannenbaum's been here not even a complete season yet, and Hickey's been here a couple seasons, and so I give them a little more leeway than I give Philbin, who's been here now. He's going on his 4th year, and you really haven't seen much change.
But the argument is that the vision won't be the same unless it's a clean sweep. Everybody who gets brought in needs to have the same vision. Vice president of football operations or general manager needs to bring in his head coach. His head coach needs to bring in his people. Then his people need to bring in their people, and so and so and so. Right. And thusly, it becomes a unified vision. What the argument is being made is that if Tannenbaum stays and Hickey stays, we already know that they argued very passionately over Jordan Phillips versus Amir Abdullah, and it wound up being Tannenbaum who won. So already that vision is messed up. And then you're going to have, supposedly you're going to have Tannenbaum bring in his guy to be the head coach, and whether that's Mangini or not, we don't know yet. But the vision is not unified. That's the argument that's being made here.
Well, and that could be, to me, that's a hard thing to discuss now without seeing what's out there. Because, I mean, there's some guys, if they needed specific GM controls, I would consider, like, Sean Payton would be somebody I would consider it making things work for his vision, because to me, he's had a very strong track record of success in the NFL.
He's had a track record, but wait, hold on. Who was his quarterback?
Drew Brees, of course. Right, but
and suddenly Brees is terrible, and now the Saints
it is. But I feel like he's an accomplished offensive mind in the NFL. I mean, I don't. Who else are you going to be pursuing? I guess it's going to be a more qualified candidate,
and that's the problem, Chad. Because we look at all these potential coaching candidates, and we're looking at, and I have to look at it because there are some times we really do have to look at the quarterback and say, well, hang on a second. Here's why they succeeded. We thought Joe Philbin was going to be awesome, but we completely ignored the fact that his quarterback was Aaron Rodgers. We thought he developed Aaron Rodgers. Nope, not the case. Philbin had nothing to do with Aaron Rodgers. How much did Drew Brees help Sean Payton succeed over all those years? And now that Drew Brees' arm is falling off, why are the Saints now terrible? It's still Sean Payton.
Oh, it is. I'm just saying I think he's one of the more qualified candidates out there. I don't know who else you're going to go pursue. I mean, probably one of the better head coaches that became available in recent years was Andy Reid when he went to the Chiefs, because even though the Chiefs, they haven't been like a dominating team, he immediately just took Alex Smith and made them a quality football team almost overnight with his coaching. And so, I mean, I would love to have Andy Reid come to Miami and get Tannehill, but it's not like that's a possibility. But I mean, my point though being is I have no idea who's going to be available that's even going to be interested, because you always have every year the Gruden, Cowher, and they get a year older and more removed from the NFL, and every year it's more unlikely they're going to even be available anyway.
They're not leaving their cushy media jobs. That's
exactly. So those guys to me are that. And so you're looking at assistants, and you got to realize who's available, who's not. Who are you competing with? The other teams that want head coaches, and I can't really get into it because it's way too difficult to see forward who the possible candidates are. And that's where Hickey and Tannenbaum play into that, because if you're getting a head coach that seems like they'll fit really well with Tannenbaum and Hickey, that's fine. And those two are completely separate as well, because I still personally, I feel like Hickey's done a solid job in his first 2 years. I wouldn't give him free passes beyond another season, but I'm comfortable with Hickey continuing to be the false title general manager where he's more of like a guy that does the scouting, and Tannenbaum's really.
And then Tannenbaum overrules him, Abdullah versus Phillips.
Right. But I mean, that for me saying I'm okay with Hickey being around and whether Tannenbaum goes or not. I think Hickey is one of these guys that'll probably work with about anybody. That's my point. I think he's a pretty easy going guy that just works really hard at scouting and talent evaluation. Tannenbaum's a little bit different story. And so I don't know if I suspect, if you want to be to guess, I think the chances of Philbin, there would have to be this miraculous turnaround and the Dolphins go on a historic run and make the playoffs to save Philbin's job. And that looks about as likely as me getting pulled up in a tornado and end up in Kansas right now. But
well, you're in Iowa, so that's impossible.
My prediction, though, is Tannenbaum will pick the next head coach. I mean, don't you think that's what's going to happen?
No, I don't.
You really don't? You think Ross is just going to fire Tannenbaum and then start over completely?
Oh, I'm sorry, Chad. I zoned out completely. I thought you said was Philbin going to wind up staying. Oh.
No, I was asking. My prediction is the next head coach is going to be picked by Tannenbaum. I think that's what's really going to happen, for the better or the worse.
Yeah, Tannenbaum's going to stay no matter what. Tannenbaum is the guy in charge now. And you know what? I understand people's concerns. Tannenbaum is the guy who helped run the Jets into the ground. But maybe people learn from their mistakes. It doesn't look like it so far because Tannenbaum has spent all this money. But it's not like he spent money on nobody. And I can't believe I have to agree with Omar again. The reason Ndamukong Suh is not looking that great, he's being double, triple teams pretty much every play, like he usually does. But we want him to beat down on two people. It's like, I'm sorry, I don't care how dominant you are, you're not going to run over two people at once. You can run over one person and then one person, but not two at once.
I personally, I mean, he's one guy out of 11. And I mean, I have not watched the film. I got to say that going forward. But on the first offensive series, I don't know if Buffalo challenged Ndamukong Suh once. They were running a lot away from him to the left. And who they were able to run over mainly was Olivier Vernon.
And Bryce McCain over and over again.
Well, Bryce McCain, they were picking on a lot in the passing game too. But and then that was their primary offensive strategy. And so, people keep saying, well, look at Ndamukong Suh, he only has X number of tackles. And you're exactly right. He's being double teamed a lot. Teams are just avoiding him because Miami has areas in their defense that they're struggling to address. And so if you're game planning against him, why wouldn't you be attacking Bryce McCain? Why wouldn't you be just trying to run the ball at Cameron Wake and Olivier Vernon? Why would you be trying to take on Ndamukong Suh? I mean, you just work around him. He's one guy. It's not that hard to call your offensive plays in a fashion that Ndamukong Suh really can't do much to get involved in those plays. And so I feel like it's not like Ndamukong Suh went from a top level defensive tackle to somebody that's terrible overnight. That's completely with the scheme and the coaching. And I would be very confident that any coach that would take that job would be thrilled that they'd have Ndamukong Suh on their team still.
I would feel that way too, Chad. I mean, there's really not much else we can talk about. We talked about pretty much everything. Ndamukong Suh is not being Ndamukong Suh because the Dolphins don't have linebackers that can eat off his plate, to actually quote Omar Kelly. I can't believe we spent this whole show saying Omar Kelly was right. I'm in shock. Well,
I just for today he was, because usually Omar is on the it's Tannenhill's. That's why the team is bad. But I did explicitly see Omar tweet today. And I don't even follow his tweets. That was just a retweet. I just saw him. You're blocked,
though, so who cares?
Well, right, but I can still follow what he says if I really wanted to. But I see him. The only time I see Omar on retweets, and he actually said that Tannehill is not the problem with the Dolphins right now. It's other issues, and so that to me is almost an understatement. That it's not Tannehill. Now I will say Tannehill has not played well.
No, he hasn't. But it's like, what can you expect at this point?
But it's not like he's just playing god awful bad, and it's not like the rest of the team is playing lights out and they're having a horrible quarterback play, and that's the issue. That's not the case. So
this is the argument.
Here's the hardest part, though, Louis. I got to ask you this: is I'm really struggling with the next game because part of me is thinking there's a strong likelihood that Joe Philbin gets fired if they lose this Jets game. And my question to you is, what do you personally think is the best chance for the Dolphins to make the playoffs? Would you rather see them win this game and maybe even the next game and get to 3-2 and try to make the playoffs under Joe Philbin? Or would you rather see them go 1-3, lose to the Jets, and get somebody else in as coach and think they have a better chance if that were to happen?
As far as I'm concerned, Chad, this season is already a wash. So your question at this point is irrelevant to me. Whether Philbin stays or Philbin goes the next game, I don't think the Dolphins are going to make the playoffs because that would mean that a miracle has taken place. I'm going to quote Omar. The Buffalo Bills came into Miami and decided that they were going to punch us in the mouth. And the Dolphins responded with, let's talk this over. The Jets are the same way. They're going to come in, punch us in the mouth, and the Dolphins, in typical Philbin-esque fashion, are going to say, well, can we have a spot of tea? Since we're going to can you tell the London stereotype there? Let's have a spot of tea. That's a terrible accent. Please don't get mad at me. But it's the same mentality. There's no physicality, and there's a bunch of bullies in this AFC East, and the Dolphins are trying to play nice with people. It's not going to work. So if it were me, this is just me, and I think this is kind of what Ian was saying last week too, and I'm going to refer back to him. At this point, I would keep Philbin for the rest of the year, let them flop because this season is a wash, and let whoever comes in next know that you're going to get at least a year. We're not going to fire you right away if you fail, because you know what? Philbin's going to fail, and this team is done unless some miracle happens and they decide that, you know what, we're not going to let this happen. We're not going to get embarrassed because of ourselves, not because of our head coach. I don't know how much they care about Philbin. I'm sure they like Philbin. He's a very nice man, salt of the earth he is, but he is not an NFL head coach. So at this point, if Dolphins suddenly make a turnaround, it's because the players themselves are tired of being embarrassed and they're like, heck no, we're done. We're going to fight because we want to fight, not because we want to prove that the coach is correct.
Right. Now I know you don't believe this, Lewis, but I honestly think the team is going to win the next two games. So we'll see. But I felt pretty strongly they were going to lose against Buffalo. If you looked at my film review, I said if they actually even want to compete with Buffalo, they have to fix these things.
And they didn't.
They didn't, and they didn't even compete with Buffalo. So, but the Jets are not the same level of team as Buffalo is. They really aren't. And
how do you figure, though?
I figure that the Jets have a lot more trouble at quarterback.
Fitzpatrick, I would actually take Fitzpatrick over Tyrod Taylor.
I was watching the Eagles against the Jets at Miami before.
I don't know what happened to the Eagles. They suddenly just woke up. That was
Fitzpatrick was not looking that good to me against the Eagles. I don't think Fitzpatrick's a very good quarterback. I'm going to say that.
I don't think so either, but that's an indictment to Tyrod Taylor, not a compliment.
Well, Tyrod Taylor played well. Granted,
it was us.
He was a cakewalk for him, but he did play well.
So
I don't feel that they have
Chad. Yeah. Tim Tebow could have put up a perfect passer rating on us.
Well, he maybe, but my point being is I don't think that the Jets have the same offensive firepower that the Bills have. I really don't.
Okay.
I think that Brandon Marshall, as talented as he is, I don't think he's as hard of a matchup for the Dolphins. He's not a real fast wide receiver. And Miami actually, with the coil cushion or whatever you want to call it, that works much better against the big, slower wide receiver than it does the quick wide receivers. So I don't think they'll have a lot of trouble containing Brandon Marshall, to be honest. And I think the defense will fare much better against the New York Jets offense than the Buffalo Bills offense. On the flip side of the ball, the Jets do have a pretty solid defensive line, and they've got, obviously they got Darrelle Revis, but I feel like the other factor in this is Miami was in London last year, and it's a whole different ball game going overseas, playing at an odd time of day, being able to everything going on over there. Miami does have the advantage of they did all of that last year, and so there should be a little bit of advantage in that they know exactly what to expect and how to prepare for that game. And it'll be a little bit more.
Did you say prepare?
Yeah, I mean, be prepared to play that game. Now, granted, I know that sounds hilarious after the last few games, but they do have experience over the Jets when it comes to the Jets. Basically, have a rookie head coach. He's clearly probably never prepped a team as a head coach to play over in England yet, and so Philbin did that exact thing last year. So I would hope that Miami is a little bit more advantageous on being ready to play over there, and I think they do match up better with the Jets, and I think they can match up pretty well with the Titans as well and get to 3-2. But with that being said, I am under no delusions of grandeur that they're going to be able to be in the vicinity of competing with the Patriots or the Cowboys or some of these teams coming down the road at them that are quality teams. And that's the hardest part for me is if the Dolphins do get to 3-2. I mean, they're on pace to me. Again, the Dolphins are going to probably end up being a 7-9 type football team, maybe 8-8 type football team. That's
get that far.
Hey, I know you don't, but there's so much talent on the team, and they've played so poorly. They can play much, much better. It's not like this team is the 1-14 Dolphins where they just did not have talent on their team at all.
Well, we don't know yet. They have to win another game before we can't call them that.
I understand that. But it's one of those things where they do have a lot of talent on their team, and I do think they'll string some wins together. They'll start playing better, but I do not believe at all that they're going to be like starting to run teams over and throwing up points or anything like that.
So, do you have a score for the Jets game? Do you have any kind of prediction other than they're just going to win? Because at this point, I kind of don't want to make my own prediction because I'm so disgusted by what I've been seeing that I probably put up some really sarcastic, awful number.
I think. I didn't get a chance to do the Buffalo score because I was traveling. We didn't get to show in. And I was
41-14.
Yeah, I was actually going to go like 35-17, 35-21 in that Buffalo game. They were going to lose. So I wouldn't expect them to play as bad as they did, but I did think they were going to lose that game. And the reality is Miami struggles to match up with Buffalo very well.
And any team that is physical, Chad.
Well, to an extent, but again, keep in mind if Miami can score points, then everything changes right away because our defense is much, much better if you can not allow a team just to power run the football continuously and keep it close. I think the final score on that Jets game is I think Miami is actually, my prediction is they're going to actually come out and have a decent first quarter, and they're going to get some points on the board, and they're going to get Fitzpatrick in a situation where he's got to throw the football a little bit, and that'll make things much, much easier for the Dolphins. So I'm going to go with Miami 28, the Jets 10. That's my score.
Those delusions of grandeur you said you weren't having?
Yeah.
I think you're having delusions of grandeur.
Oh, we'll see.
My prediction is that the Dolphins are going to do the same crap they've been doing for the past 3 games. They're not going to run the football. They're going to get pummeled. They're not going to be able to stop them because you know what? Chris Ivory is a power runner, and he's going to run it down their throats all over again. And you know what? I think it's going to wind up being a really ugly game. It's going to wind up being something along the lines of 28-7. I don't think the Dolphins have it in them. They don't want to run the football. They keep trying to make Tannehill pass it when he's getting rushed 5 people at once. Even if there's only looks like there's 5 because 5 people can't seem to stop 4.
Yeah.
And the defense just doesn't seem to be able to stop. They're going to be the same.
I will say if you're correct, I don't think Philbin makes it to the bye week. If Miami gets beat by the New York Jets 28-7, I don't think he makes the bye week. That's my prediction. I don't. If they do lose, I think it'll be a closer game. I don't think Miami's going to get blown out by the Jets. You're giving a lot of credibility to the Jets. I don't think the Jets are in the vicinity of a playoff contender yet. They're just
neither do I, Chad. But you know what? I didn't expect anything from Jacksonville either.
Well, in Jacksonville won by 3 points. Washington lost by 7 points.
Can you imagine if they had played a clean game, Chad? We were close in that game because Jacksonville kept stepping on their own feet.
Well, I think the Jets are going to be similar. They're not going to. Ryan Fitzpatrick is not Tom Brady. They're not going to just come in and just start tearing us apart. I don't believe. So I'm 50-50 on what I want to happen, Lewis, because I honestly think the team may be further ahead if they do get blown out by the Jets and get Philbin out of there, because I think a different coach could do wonders with the talent they have if they just changed it up a little bit. But the bottom line is the next two games, the Jets are not a very good football team, and neither are the Titans, and they're going to get a bye week to prepare for the Titans. And so, and Miami's coming into that Jets game relatively healthy. I don't know what the status is of Deion Sims, but they didn't get any major injuries. Nobody was trying, so nobody got hurt in the Buffalo game. So, I don't think Miami's coming in relatively in pretty good shape health-wise, and so I don't know. I don't feel like the Jets are a team that can just blow Miami out of the water. They just don't have the team to do it. Unless if Miami comes out and they turn the ball over 3 times and they just play god awful like mistake football, then of course the Jets could blow them out. But I don't see it. In Miami, this is historically, Miami started the season this way. They've bounced back in the middle of it, and then usually they melt down when they play the bigger teams. I don't think Miami's going to make the playoffs. I just think they're going to win the next 2 games, and then it's going to be some rough sledding from there. I think if you were to ask me, I think Miami will probably get swept by the Patriots. Pretty good chance they're going to get swept by the Bills as well. And that's pretty well going to be the end of their playoff aspiration. I don't know that they can compete with the Houston Texans with their defensive line that they have there, but that they're not the same quality team that the Patriots are, or Buffalo. So I honestly think Buffalo is going to make a solid run at the playoffs this year. They're a very, very good football team.
That I'll believe, yeah.
No,
I believe Buffalo will make the playoffs, as a wild card team, because at this point, the only thing that was holding them back is the quarterback position. And you know what? If Tyrod Taylor can develop and turn into
he's got a long way to go yet, because teams usually start to figure guys out as the season goes on. But
if he can become a poor man's first year RG3, they have a good shot.
It is, but here's my thinking right now in the big picture is obviously the Patriots are off and running as the team to beat right now again, but the Steelers are in trouble now. Roethlisberger is out for a while, and so I just don't know if Pittsburgh is going to consistently be able to hang in there with Vic at quarterback. That's going to be a huge blow to them. I mean, Roethlisberger is very good, and so him being out is going to have a dramatic effect on them. The Ravens, I think, have just been so depleted. I don't think the Ravens are going to be that competitive of a football team this year. And you know who the worst quarterback is through your magical QB rating right now in the NFL is?
Mm-hmm.
You know who it is?
No, I don't want to know.
Andrew Luck is the worst rated quarterback in the NFL right now.
Which is more proof that it's bullcrap, but go ahead.
It is, but my point being, the Colts got really lucky to sneak out against Tennessee with the win. They're struggling right now. And so I don't see who the powerhouse AFC teams are going to be right now for the wild card. And
New England.
No, New England's going to win the division, I would have.
New England, if people are saying New England's going to go undefeated.
Well, I doubt that, but who knows? But my point is, I think New England's going to win the East, but I think Buffalo is in a very prime position to get that wild card, because I don't see who the other wild card contenders. It's looking early that Denver is the team to beat in the West, and it looks like the Cincinnati Bengals are probably going to be the team to beat in the North. And the South, as usual, just looks god awful. There's nobody good in the AFC South. And in the East, it's obviously the Patriots, but I think Buffalo can probably beat any team in the AFC right now, except maybe the Patriots that Buffalo could handle pretty well. So I don't like the Buffalo Bills, but this is their year to make the playoffs if they're going to do it.
Yep, I agree. Well, Chad, it's been a very long night. It's past midnight where I'm at.
Yeah,
so
all right, it was fun.
Yeah, we're gonna wrap this show up, guys. I hope you enjoyed listening to us be angry, because that's pretty much what this whole show was, just us complaining about the Dolphins and what their problems are. And you know what, guys? I got to be perfectly honest with you. There are problems. There really isn't a whole lot of good things to say. The only really bright spot at this point is how good Rashard Matthews has been since he's become a regular player, and Chad doesn't think he'll stick around anyway. So so much for that bright spot. The silver lining is going to leave along with some of the clouds, I guess. So
It's like that. Have you ever seen that movie, The Replacements? It's a football movie about when the teams go on strike.
I didn't see that one.
Well, there's a scene in the movie where they just get pummeled in the game. They get in a fight in the bar after and all this stuff. But that line in the movie stuck with me after that Buffalo game when they asked how'd that game go, and he responds, I don't really know. It's just all blurred into one big beating. And that's what it felt like as a fan walking out of that game. And I've been in. This is the third straight Buffalo game I've been at, and usually the Buffalo fans are pricks and they're heckle and they're loud and boisterous. But actually, walking back in the parking lot and all the Buffalo fans, I didn't really even. I mean, it was almost like Buffalo felt bad for us. I mean, it really felt that way because
I talked to a few Buffalo fans on the way out. I basically told them congratulations on having a head coach who care, and they pretty much sympathize with me. We know what it's like to be bad, man. Trust me. We know. Yeah, we feel sorry for you.
That's what that was like. It was like, what's the point? If the game spoke for itself so much that it wasn't like, haha, we pulled the game out at the end, in a real tough game. It was just like, wow, what a joke.
It's like the schoolyard bully beating on the 4-year-old.
No, it's those games. Even if you win those games as a fan, it's just like, God, when the game's over, by the middle of the third quarter, it's like everybody, even the teams that win it, it's like it wasn't worth the price of admission. It's such a boring game at that point.
Stop, dude, Chad. It wasn't even worth the price for parking.
Well, I mean, it's that way for Buffalo even, because you're thinking by the middle of the third quarter, the Buffalo fans are like, get our starters out of there. I mean, don't get anybody hurt because this game is over. And it's just like everybody's just like, get the game over with. And that's not what you want from an entertainment standpoint, is everybody in the stadium just saying, let's just get this over with. Even the players, you could just see it.
So yeah.
Anyway,
so we're going to call it a night, guys. It's been a long show, a lot of complaining, a lot of ranting, a lot of kind of analysis while we're ranting and complaining. But you know what? That's kind of what sometimes you just need one of these to make an entertaining show. And you know what? I kind of feel a little better after having a nice vent about this whole mess.
Absolutely.
So I want to thank you guys for joining us. It'll be available on SoundCloud in the morning. Luckily, now I have my new powerful internet, so it won't take 5 hours to upload. So celebrate. We're going to have SoundCloud in the morning. And so for my co-host, Chad Ronnebaum, and for our other person, Matthew Canada, who bowed out like a third of the way through the show because he was tired, which I can understand. I'm tired too. So good night, Matt. And good night to you, Chad, as well. Good night, everybody. It's been a long day. And for some of you who are across the other side of the world, did you know we have fans on the other side of the world, Chad?
I did. I talked to a guy in England at the game, and I talked to the guys that are the UK Dolphins guys. So they're pretty excited this week. So for the Dolphins, the Dolphins have a pretty good following in England. So
yep, they sure do. So for those of you who are listening on the other side of the world, good morning. And we'll see you next time for the PhinManiacs.com podcast.